All right. Well, welcome. Today I have with me my friend Fred Tan, who's joining us from Hong Kong. Fred is a recent graduate of Columbia Business School, worked with me on his applications a few years ago. Fred, really great to connect, and thank you again for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Great to have this chance. Thanks for your help during my application.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I really enjoyed working with you. So I'll start by just allowing you to tell us just a little bit more about your background. Would love to hear a little bit more about what you were doing in school, why you applied to business school, and maybe a little bit about what you're doing now out in Hong Kong.
Sure. So let me start with my experience prior to business school. So I am an international student. I grew up in China and subsequently went to high school in the UK and eventually decided to come to United States for college. And I decided to pick a career in finance when I was studying at Boston College. Did summer internship at Citi and subsequently joined Citi as a full-time analyst in their risk management division, and worked about 3 years at Citigroup, and decided to apply to Columbia because I have made a decision about my career and where I eventually want to be. That is two parts. One is I want to go back to Asia, which is a dynamic market and really offers a lot of opportunity in the financial service industry. And also my family is still here, so I want to come back to join them. And to realize that goal, business school actually presented itself as a great opportunity because a lot of international opportunities, the easiest way for them to recruit people with experience overseas is actually to go to a reputable business school in United States or in the UK. So after doing my research, I decided to apply to business school. And my 2 years at Columbia really prepared me well for my post-business school job from two aspects. One is academically, I did learn a great deal. You know, a lot of people say MBA is more about connecting to people and imparting with your friends. But at Columbia, I think the academic side of MBA education was tremendously engaging and really grow myself as both on my knowledge on the finance side, but also having the chance to interact with people with different background and from different businesses really opened my horizon and understanding different companies, which eventually is helping me at this moment because post Columbia, I'm working as a equity research associate at a research firm, and I'm working in Hong Kong. So this is the second part, which is a connection I made both with international students who are from Asia, which they helped me a lot in sourcing my full-time job opportunity, but also see the connection I've made who remained in the United States, continue to offer help as I learn more about the space I'm looking at. When you're looking at a Chinese internet company and want to compare that to Amazon and Google, I always find useful contact because there are students working in the finance space from Columbia, but also a lot of them do join the tech sector, and having the chance to talk to them really helped me learn more quickly about the target I'm looking at. So really, the business school prepared me extremely well for my full-time job, but long way to go and still a lot to learn. Now the first time I'm working in Asia.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm really, really excited for you and impressed by all you've done and all you've accomplished. I definitely want to hear a little bit more about Columbia and your finance career to date and some of the stuff you're doing. But let's start first with the application process. If you a couple years ago, I know you just graduated from Columbia, so this is going back a couple of years. But I remember you having stellar stats, That's right. You had a 760 on the GMAT. I think you said a 3.8 GPA. So you were a pretty strong candidate, and you had a finance background, which is obviously kind of a natural fit for a school like Columbia. So did you have any doubts or concerns about your potential to get into business school?
I, at the first glance, when I know my GPA when I was applying, but
Yeah.
once I got my 760, I thought, I will probably have a good chance of getting into business school in general.
Mm-hmm.
But after talking to back then, my understanding was, talk to a lot of people, see what their stats are, right, and see do I stand a reasonable good chance against them, and I realized, well, there were a ton of really, extremely well accomplished candidates around me. So, and a lot of them work in the finance sector as well. I work in risk management, and which is a typical middle office role. But there were a lot of candidates coming from investment banking division, and some of them was not successful when they applied to business school for the first time. So at that moment, you start with extreme confidence, and then the confidence start to fade away. But I think as I prepare myself more and trying to discover my personal story in my application, you eventually the confidence level will go up and reach the reality, which is the correct assessment of where I stand and what is the best kind of school for me, and also in terms of deciding, is this school, do I stand a reasonable good chance to getting into that business school, or not, or who is too far of a stretch for me. I think it take a process to eventually come to the what I think is a more correct or the objective conclusion about myself as a candidate. But definitely in the beginning, once I passed that exciting period of getting my GMAT score and start to talk to people, that was a point I started to have doubt about, in finance, was I in the good part of financial service industry? And is 760 even good enough? Considering I'm an international candidate, and student from China, they have 800, they have 780. Is that too good to battle a score? So at the moment, I did have some doubts, especially when I was after the exam, I start to prepare myself for the action.
I think that's really interesting. I think it's true. Like, no matter how good your candidacy is, you're always going to find online courses or other people who can kind of psych you out and talk you out of your own confidence. But it's interesting for me to hear that your confidence came back once you started getting clear on how you were going to position yourself and what your brand was. So how did you ultimately do that? What is the strategy that you took to differentiate yourself from maybe other international finance candidates to make sure that you were seen as unique and different and better?
Yes. So what I did is, I think that's always sort of a good thing, that you don't overestimate yourself. Otherwise, you won't do much work in the problem. So I did. I was concerned, so that's why I started to do more work. I think I got really stuck when I got the essay questions, because, well, I didn't know I had an interesting life. Right? I traveled a fair bit, and then I worked at a bank. Yeah, I studied at a college. That was sort of the first maybe a few ideas come to my mind. But I think the critical part is to just spend more time like working out a plan. I think as the moment we'll work on something that really just goes over this life story of a person. That in that case, that was me, and what exactly did I do, and what what did I learn from those stories? And at that process, it takes time and takes effort, but gradually it does come out. A lot of things you already forgot. You thought you think you might not know those they are not important, or you just don't mention that when you're talking to people. So and these stories come out, and that was a good chance for me to reflect myself, right, about what do I eventually want to do. So thinking about what my family have went through, there was actually a financial disaster, right, in that back in the 90s in China, when not too much finance activity were heavily regulated, and there are all things people do. And what did I learn? And I realized that may be the motivation that actually pushed me to go to risk management in the first place. I think these stories, I can always conclude almost anyone that are applying to business school, they all went to college. They all work in some kind of professional service or large corporation.
Right. Yeah.
But the reason behind them and the unique experience that leads them to attend a particular college, go to a particular country, decide to work in a particular industry, that really reflect themselves as a person. And also, that was a good point to think on what leads you to this point, like today, when you're applying to business school, and what do you seek to achieve? Because a question often asked by business school is, what's your post MBA long-term or short-term goal? And I think having a crystal clear answer at that point will really helping me writing my essay on, who I am, why I'm going to business school, and what I think I will achieve, or I hope I can, I hope to achieve by attending business school. So that was just a part of my thought process. Of course, that's long, but I think putting a lot of effort in digging a lot of stories from, that wasn't long, just 20 some years of my life, was extremely helpful, not only for the application, of course, but also for the 2 years after that when you actually will have to think about what you need to do after business school.
God, there's so much good advice there. I think that's right on, right? I mean, you're right. Everybody went to college. Everybody worked for a few years. But you were able to go back and say, well, what really matters most to me? That kind of launched my career and my interest in risk management that went back to my childhood. And then the importance of getting clear on your career goals so that your essays are really compelling and authentic. I mean, that's all spot on advice. I agree with every inch of that. That was perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so tell me this, right? So you're a super smart guy. You're 3'8", 760. Do you have to have the stats that you do, or do you have to be as smart as you are to launch a career in investment banking and finance? I think that's a question that I get from candidates all the time who don't have quite the stats that you do, but that have investment banking or related type goals. Like, do you have to be an absolute all-star like you are, or do you see people in your field who weren't quite as impressive on paper as you are?
I will say the answer is definitely no. So now I do have some credit on my side, since now I'm working in the sector, that a lot of these a lot of the nature of the work in both investment banking and a lot of fundamental driven finance are knowledge and common sense driven. So knowledge by meaning is you actually, so the more you know, the better you can do. So I don't think that's highly correlated to the intelligence or where we saw the sort of mathematical, like how well you do at your GMAT, or how well you do at your math test. It's whether you're hardworking and organized in terms of moving forward a bit every day. So eventually you will have more knowledge, by year 1
Yeah.
or year 2 or year 10. And that really supports you, as a senior manager in the industry. So that's one part that's knowledge driven. Second is common sense, right? A lot of that's pretty basic. If you can do well, reasonably well, you don't need to get any score higher than, a 700
Mm.
to demonstrate that you can think in a logical sense. You have the common sense of what's reasonable, what's not.
Yeah.
And that's not an extremely high bar for almost anyone, I think. And so that really reflect to what I think the minimum requirement for investment banking or fundamental driven finance is pretty much you need to have the math skill from a high school, and you need to be a people with common sense.
Yeah.
And apart from that, that you need to be organized and extremely hardworking and willing to learn. And don't forget what you've learned from yesterday.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't move forward. So, and with that, you can excel in the industry.
I
A
love it.
lot of the stats you see from candidates in the industry are, because the bar is not, the minimum bar is not so high, right?
Yeah.
However, it is a really, challenging and interesting and, to be fair, a well-paid job. The stats are, I think, a lot of them are due to, just extremely large quantity of candidates applying to so few spots that
Right.
you have to put some, school tag or scores tag to
Yeah.
in some cases. But that's not what I've seen from pretty most of the large banks when I was recruiting at
Interesting.
Columbia Business School. So I don't think that's a concern. But I think having said that, I have to acknowledge that getting a job in investment banking or investment management, private equity are extremely competitive.
Yeah.
And it's more about taking the effort and putting the hours and hard work and organize yourself to make sure that you keep improving. And especially once you get into business school, you only have very limited amount of time
Yeah.
if you haven't worked in finance, you only have a semester to get a summer internship in investment banking. So that's not too much of a time, but I think from the past experience, that was enough time because most people who wanted to do it and put in the work, they were able to get a job. So, so I think any candidates need to be organized and really put in a lot of work in terms of getting the opportunity and working in the industry. And I think the same applies once you are already in the industry and trying to do your job well. So I hope that explains what I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. And I think you raise a really good point there too. I feel like a lot of MBA candidates feel like they're going to have time when they get into business school to go skipping through meadows, listening to Tony Robbins seminars, figuring out who they want to be. But in reality, like recruitment starts pretty quickly and you have to pretty much have your plan in place almost immediately upon walking in the door, if not very soon thereafter, because that starts pretty quickly. So it goes back to what you're saying before about getting clear on your goals even before you apply, not only for the benefit of your admissions essays, but so that you hit the ground running once you're in the doors of school itself. I think that makes a lot of sense. So what exactly is the recruitment process like trying to get into investment banking? Well, like you talk a lot about, hit the ground running and work really hard and put in the time. But what does that actually look like when you're in business school? Like, how do you become one of those few candidates that gets into investment banking?
Sure. So there are actually two tracks, but I think the first one really applied to more candidates.
Okay.
That is the typical recruiting track for United States.
Uh-huh.
For United States, the recruiting process really starts from think the 3rd or 4th week after entering to business school, because the school will force the company out for the first few weeks, so that actually you don't need to encounter them day one, right, after you enter business school. So they will start come to school, and typically that start with company presenting in a school-wide event, only limited to business school, and there will be alums. They are the core recruiting force. So every school will be different, and that was the first interaction you'll have with these people in the bank, and starting from there, that was a long and it takes many rounds. It was called the coffee chats or the networking process, but I was more a half interview or half of coffee chat, because any coffee chat can turn into interview almost instantaneously. And so you start with talking to the associate who has a recent MBA grad, and then eventually they will introduce you to higher up VPs and managing directors.
Interesting. So you almost have to work your way up the chain, kind of start at the junior levels, and then if they like you, they'll refer you higher up in the organization.
Yeah, again, it depends on the bank. Some banks are more formal. You have to talk to as many people, like 10, or some banks we are limiting to like 2 rounds. But that was a good chance for you to learn more about the bank, but also talk to the people there, see whether you connect, because although they look the same, all the names you've heard, but in reality, the banks, they do differ by the way they work, the culture, and the clients they're helping with. So that was a good chance for you to differentiate the banks, and also and understand whether it's a good match. Right? There are just a dozen banks, and eventually you will have to go to only one of them. And that the outcome of that recruiting, the networking is your first round interview slot. So they were based on the interaction you had in the past few months to decide whether to give you a first round interview. And that happened in December, which is toward the end of your first semester, if the school is running a semester-based system. And the first round interview will be in January, once you come back from your Christmas. I don't think you should take a long vacation, given that it start right away once you get back to school. And then there will be a 2 week of very intense on-campus and super day interviews. And the good part about investment banking and consulting is you get pretty much done by week 2 of your second semester. So that's a structured recruiting process. And that's I think one good thing is it's more predictable, because every school recruit every year. All those banks have target schools, so we pretty much have a good idea of how many slots will there be, for this bank this summer. So that's a summer internship. Pretty much most of the summer, so the summer MBA associate will have a high chance of landing a full-time offer. That varies, from year to year, but most likely a lot of them will end up, joining the same bank once they graduate.
It makes a lot of sense. Great. I think that's really helpful. I get those types of questions all the time about what is it really like when you're trying to get those jobs. So it's great to get the info straight from the source. So just a couple more questions. So any other advice for candidates Columbia specifically? And another way to look at that, Columbia has asked, at least for the last few years, the same question, which is how are you going to take advantage of being at the very center of business, right? That's kind of, a candidate's opportunity to kind of make their pitch. So what advice would you have for candidates on that essay, or more broadly, just trying to appeal to Columbia and get into the school?
I think for at the very center of business, the question is, I find it particularly difficult to answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I live in New York prior to applying to business school, so sort of New York leaves me as sort of my fixed view on what I do, where do I go, and I for a while I was really just stayed in that box, right? Because I go to the city and I like this restaurant, but you if you ask, I ask myself, do they really? They do care, but do they really care that much in terms of what kind of restaurant do I go? Well,
Right.
that's probably not the reason you apply to Columbia Business School.
Yeah.
So I had the advantage of knowing New York well, but also disadvantage of living there, for too long and forget about all the other things the city can offer. So that was the part I found difficult. So I actually, what I did was, trying to just do more research on, because it's a business school. So um, you can do research on what kind of culture events they offer, but I think it's easier actually to find out how many companies are there, what kind of business they do. If it's Google, yeah, Google is there, but what specifically does Google do, right, in New York? And think about your goal in background. You already answered the first question. That's why you're moving to this one. So you having a clear goal, then you have a better picture of, okay, so to achieve that, how can the city help me?
Right.
What kind of thing I will have by going to New York, but I can't have by going to another place, not naming any other city or other schools, but that's probably the way of think about that. And go to the school's website, see what are the faculties, what are their backgrounds. And you'll be surprised and to learn probably some faculties, you will not be surprised. Sorry, I have to say that again. Some faculties, they do work in New York, and by the physical constraints, they probably can only teach in one of the two schools in New York City.
Yeah.
And you also happen, if you are interested in mass management, a lot of faculties, they are Columbia alum, and they work in a hedge fund in Midtown. So there are only one school they're willing to be teaching, which is Columbia Business School. So digging more on that, it's actually a lot easier. I think for candidates who live in a place that's pretty far away from New York, it will be difficult for him or her to just visit the city a dozen times to get a sense of what it's like, or
Right.
without the experience of living there. But a lot of the business related information are right there online, and you can make it won't take too much of the mental effort to make a pretty clear logical connection between the resources city and school can offer and the resources city and school co-offers to achieving your goal, right? And I think that's the case for majority of people, where New York is nice, but there isn't a particular reason that you want to go to New York. Like if you are really interested in ballet, yeah, of course they have the city ballet, or you're interested in some music or Broadway. That might be the case for someone, a portion of our candidates, but for a lot of people, you have a general sense that, yeah, it's a dynamic city, I want to go and live there, and I definitely learn a lot. But if you don't have such a non-business, non-career, non-academic related reason, a easier way for you to answer that question might be to connect that with your post MBA goal and what you seek to achieve from your 2 years. So I think that's my shorten the period where you're writing this essay and don't know what to write. Yeah.
I think that's perfect. I completely agree. You should match that essay up with the current first essay where they're asking you about your career goals and make that case in that context. And while, like you're saying, like going to the theater and going to restaurants is a nice perk of New York, it shouldn't be the central tenet of how you're going to take advantage of New York City. You should root it more in your academic interests and your career goals. That makes perfect sense. I really agree with everything you've said.
So also you asked about mistakes or something that candidates often miss. I think it's hard to, there are people with, particular experiences they can write about. You can't change what happened before. So that part you can't do. And also, most people, as acknowledged, they have in one way or the other similar paths in terms of college and corporate. So I think
Yeah.
it's hard to really just write an essay that the school want to reject you. But that on the one exception, that is you did not answer the question. And I think, I also look at people asking for help and look at their essay. And one thing is they put a lot of effort in terms of differentiating themselves, which is something you should definitely do.
Yeah.
But also remember that how many sub questions the prompt is asking, and make sure that you answer all of them. That's really basic and it's really easy to do. But it's just, if you are going to make a mistake, that's probably the mistakes you're going to make.
Yeah.
Just I want to put it here so that just do once you do the last check of your essay as a candidate, I would recommend people to make sure you just answer the question. And that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Love it. Really great. So last question, hopefully a fun question, and that is, based on your current perspective, right, as a recent graduate of Columbia Business School working internationally in investment banking, what would you say are the 3 most important qualities that a successful business person has to possess?
Well, there are a few things that makes a business person great. But I think eventually you want to be not only a business person, but a business person that really excel in a large organization. So one thing is, I think, definitely leadership. That's something definitely we will learn, as I learned from my experience at Columbia, where that's definitely a great part of focus. Second, I think, is integrity. I think it's especially now when everything is so transparent and people can learn about the background of a person quite quickly and learn about other people's feedback. I think the at the age of internet, now I'm referring to the internet company I'm covering, establishing a brand is extremely difficult because people are more accessible to just so many options. The same applied for the success of a person. I think integrity and the ethical standard you hold in your life really define yourself and really help you build your reputation and earn the trust from others. Without that, it's a huge risk for anyone in the area. And I think finally it's what I think is the I mentioned before, the right way to improve and the right way to learn. It's not only hardworking. Hardworking is a condition, but that because I see a lot of people working really hard, and sometimes the energy run down, and they sort of start to not like their job, or managing that part was also an aspect of that really you learning and working in a way that makes you fully engaged and improve yourself on an ongoing basis. I think I'm not there yet, but I do think our running to an era, a time like that when I've learned a lot on my job, and then I've sort of stopped learning and being comfortable. I think the world is changing so fast that um, having the habit of um, um, just getting more knowledge, getting always find a way of improving what you've been doing, or you are doing, or you will be doing, is extremely important for anyone to be successful. Because it's although I said banking is common sense, but finance is I don't know, exponentially more complex than
Yeah.
the Goldman Sachs partner might encounter in the 1930s, right?
Right.
It's not about the math, but more about how much knowledge you need to accumulate in order to execute these large transactions or looking at these complex companies. And now it's more tech driven. Um, you need to learn a bit more about the technology than about the laser or about the Bitcoin, about the clouds and all these ERM,
Yeah.
etc. technology. It takes time,
Sure.
and I think having the word that I can learn, I don't know now, it's fine at the early stage, but eventually you have to come to the stage where, well, I know that I already learned a fair bit, because that's what we think about the moat of the person is you putting a lot of time learning something that just a new entry have to spend the same amount of time to learn, right? So I think
Right.
having the attitude of that and the habit of learning is extremely important. So I would say that the three qualities for a successful business leader nowadays.
Fantastic. Fred, thank you again so much. This was so informative, so helpful. I know you're crazy busy. I know it's almost 10 p.m. there in Hong Kong. Looks like you're still in the office. So thank you. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So I hope that was helpful, and um, good that we had a chance to catch up. So that was good. Yeah.